Ready to roll. Turn left. Turn right.
All right, good evening. Happy New Year, everyone. This is John Tapp with Peterbilt 7579. And we're going to be doing tracker transportation today. And we're going to begin with the mobile tracker, which is the probably from mobile, which is the dump truck for Lake Charles, Louisiana. And this includes the Lowboy trailer. So let's go get that and go for a ride.
Okay, here we go. Okay, let's find a new route.
At smaller or more specific thing.
Yes, there are a lot more studies on this, and the smaller and more specific it is, the better it works, the more positive it is. So we talked about like adding more vegetables versus stop eating junk food. The first one's going to be better. And, you know, I'm going to run a marathon is a lot, but maybe I'm just going to, you know, take a jog after lunch every day. Start there, or maybe aim for a 5K, something small if you're a runner. If you're not a runner, don't make a running resolution, you know? That's kind of crazy, but that's my tip. And like, I had a friend who called me once with all her, she had a fantastic list, but it had like, I don't know, 7 or 8 things on it. It was like, I'm gonna run, I'm gonna write my novel, I'm gonna work out every day, I'm gonna learn to juggle, and she just had this long list, and I said to her, how about one? How about one resolution? She's like, well, which one? I said, how about, I like learn to juggle.
Yeah.
That's a great resolution. Like, that is something fun, it's cool, it's wacky, it's a good kind of stress break. I could see being able to find time for it, you know, in between
Turn
meetings.
Did it work? Can
She
juggle
totally
now?
learned to juggle. Yes. I was so proud of her. I do love a crazy resolution. I think that's sort of a neat way to say, I'm going to do something really unorthodox. And I think that's a good direction.
Aside from juggling, is there a favorite resolution that you would recommend?
My favorite, and it's incredibly simple, is to just finish the sentence, I've always wanted to play. And that's it. That's your resolution. Do that thing you've always wanted to do.
Tara Parker Pope writes the Substack One Day Better, a science-based health podcast. Thank you so much, Heather.
This is NPR News. Whether your weekend is full of work or play, recharging or catching up, life doesn't stop. And the news and the stories that impact your life every day, they don't slow down. All Things Considered is here every Saturday and Sunday to bring you the news and help you lighten up with the latest in music, movies, and books. Join us for thoughtful conversations and reporting that keeps you in the know and your weekend warm.
All Things Considered Weekend, Saturdays and Sundays at 4 p.m. on News 88.7.
Ever have a moment when you learn the truth behind a story and it changes how you think about a whole lot of things? I'm Britt Gladstone from Home Media, and we have that experience every single week. It's kind of a rush. So join us at WNYC Studios on the media.
On the Media, Saturdays at 5 p.m. on News 88.7.
So,
Where are you? Here at Radio Lab, we go places.
Riding in an elevator.
From her bathroom.
We're walking through shin-length grass.
Are we in a boat?
No, but we're gonna be in the movie.
On Mars.
cars.
In my closet.
Poughkeepsie, New York.
To
Kolkata.
Inside the womb.
Wow.
and
Everywhere.
Desert of the Lobster.
Radio Lab, Saturdays at 9 p.m. on News 88.7.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Dan Roman. It's been 2 weeks today since a new law required the Justice Department to release all of the files related to convicted deceased sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. One of the members of Congress who wrote the law is California Democrat Ro Khanna, who told NPR millions of documents are still being held, and the Justice Department says it could be weeks before all of the material is released.
They've already violated the law by having this delay. They are claiming that the file is so big that they need to put hundreds of lawyers and they need the extra time. They frankly should have been doing this months ago when Massey and I introduced the law.
Congressman Khanna says he and Republican Thomas Massey are less concerned about the Justice Department's delay than they are about what he says the Justice Department is withholding. China's military recently concluded 2 days of drills rehearsing an attack on Taiwan by air, sea, and rocket forces. As Ashish Valentine reports, China says the drills were well within its rights, while Taiwan and the United States are condemning them.
Chinese defense spokesperson Zhang Xiaogang said in a press conference that military exercises were a necessary response to Taiwan's separatist politics. He called them a successful test of the military's joint operations capabilities, warning to other nations not to interfere with China's claim on Taiwan. The drills involved dozens of rockets, aircraft, and warships. Taipei condemned the drills as a threat to regional security. And Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te said Taiwan is determined to boost defense spending to protect its democracy. U.S. State Department spokesperson Thomas Pickett urged Beijing to show restraint and cease military pressure on Taiwan. For NPR News, I'm Ashish Valentine.
On Wall Street, stocks finished the first day of the trading year mix. The Dow was up, the S&P was up, the NASDAQ was negative. This is NPR News. Even though it's winter in the northern hemisphere, the Earth will make its closest approach to the sun at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. As Joe Allen explains, distance from the sun is not what explains the seasons.
If the orbit of the Earth around the sun were perfect, then the two bodies would always be the same distance apart. But Earth's orbit is elliptic, very slightly squashed circle, meaning every year there's a single time when it's closest and another when it's furthest away. But even if it were circular, there would still be seasons. That's because the Earth is tilted away from straight up and down in its orbit. The tilt is significant, 23 degrees. In winter, the North Pole points away from the sun and in summer towards the sun. Longer time bathed in sunlight does more to explain changes in temperature than slight changes in distance. For NPR News, I'm Joe Block.
The National Hockey League's Florida Panthers and New York Rangers will drop the puck tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And for the first time ever, the annual Winter Classic will be played at Miami's Lone Depot Park, the home of the Major League Baseball Miami Marlins. With miles of pipe and 2 truckloads worth of refrigeration equipment, the NHL has built an outdoor rink in sunny Miami. Officials say compared to other outdoor rinks in colder climates, this one in Miami was actually less difficult to plan and execute. From Washington, I'm Dan Ronan, NPR News.
I'm Greg Dalton.
And I'm Ariana Brocious. On Climate One, we believe that addressing the climate crisis begins by talking about it.
So we engage diverse voices to deepen your understanding of all aspects of the climate emergency, the individual and the systemic.
The scary and the exciting, causes and solutions.
So join us for conversations about the most critical issue of our time on Climate One.
Sundays at 6 a.m. on News 88.7.
You come to the New Yorker Radio Hour for conversations that go deeper with people you really want to hear from, whether it's Bruce Springsteen or Questlove or Olivia Rodrigo, Liz Cheney, or some of my extraordinarily well-informed colleagues at the New Yorker. So join us every week on the New Yorker Radio Hour for real conversations that matter.
The New Yorker Radio Hour, Sundays at 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from the Kauffman Foundation, providing access to opportunities that help people achieve financial stability, upward mobility, and economic prosperity, regardless of race, gender, or geography. Kaufman.org. From the Walton Family Foundation, working to create access to opportunity for people and communities by tackling tough social and environmental problems. More information is at waltonfamilyfoundation.org. And from the listeners who support this NPR station.
On a Friday, it's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Scott Detrow. 2025 was supposed to be a big year for cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. President Trump had promised to make the U.S. the crypto capital of the world once he took office. Instead, the vibes are decidedly off starting the new year. This is after a spectacular market crash in the fall. We are joined by NPR senior business editor Raphael Nam for more. Hey, Scott, let's start with this. How did things get so bad?
So I kind of look at it this way. It's like the crypto industry went on a huge party, this huge bender, and is now suffering a really bad hangover. Things started pretty good last year. It wasn't just the president. Regulators, Congress have become much friendlier to the industry, so everybody got very optimistic. As a result, cryptocurrencies surged for most of last year. And in order to make even more profits, many investors borrowed a lot of money so they could make even bigger bets on crypto. And it worked until this humongous crash in October. Bitcoin, for example, hit a record high of around 126,000 in early October, and today it's trading at around 90,000, give or take. That's about a 30% decline.
I've seen parties go bad quickly in a lot of different ways. What happened to end this huge party?
So the trigger on this one was a social media post by President Trump in October, in which he threatened to impose an additional 100% tariff on China. So that really alarmed investors, and financial markets from stocks to cryptos plunged. The thing is, though, Trump eventually backed down from that threat, so other markets like stocks recovered. The S&P, for example, just hit a record high last month. Crypto did not, and that's because of how bad the losses were. All the borrowing I mentioned earlier, Scott, was great when markets were going up. It meant investors were winning even more money, but when things turned, it magnified the losses. So I talked to Mark Kingsford. He's a consumer finance advocate at America's Financial Reform, and this is how he put it.
So you have this sort of house of cards, or maybe a series of dominoes that, with a click of a switch, just collapse in hours.
And that collapse has now lasted a month.
But isn't that exactly what critics had been warning about for a long time? It's just an incredibly volatile market.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Scott. I mean, cryptocurrencies are fairly young, but we've seen this incredible boom and bust cycles already. It happened in 2022, for example. Things were booming at the start of the year. A lot of the Super Bowl commercials featured crypto companies, if you remember, Scott. And then events like interest rate hikes from the Federal Reserve sparked intense volatility in the crypto markets, and FTX, one of the biggest crypto exchanges, just collapsed. Hayes says this is what happens when markets are fueled by speculation.
Things are good as long as the music keeps playing. But sooner or later, when those notes kind of die out and the tide goes out, as it were, it exposes the vulnerabilities and fragilities in these markets in ways that cause real problems.
And Hayes believes this is once again history repeating itself.
So what happens now?
So I talked to quite a few people, and everyone is very subdued, almost like resigned. But everybody's still optimistic that this crash will just be a blip. And there are reasons for that. They say, unlike previous years, things are fundamentally changing. For example, Trump selected Paul Atkins, who used to be a consultant for the crypto sector, to head the Securities and Exchange Commission, essentially to be the sheriff for Wall Street. And Congress last year passed legislation for the crypto sector that was considered friendly for the industry, and is now debating rules that could determine who gets to oversee these markets. So many people in the crypto industry still think Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies will soon recover.
That is NPR senior business editor Raphael Nam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins says more changes are coming to SNAP this year. Changes that include work requirements, also restrictions on what people can purchase with their benefits. This is after recipients saw their benefits disrupted in 2025. About 42 million Americans currently rely on the program. There are additional resources out there. Host of Life Kit, Marielle Sagata, talked with Kevin Curry about this. Curry is founder of Fit Men Cook. That after he left grad school in 2008, he found he needed to use SNAP benefits as a bridge. Curry spoke to Life Kit about options for finding free or reduced cost food when it is tough to afford food.
The first thing we're going to talk about is places that offer free groceries or meals with no questions asked. And a good
variety, that there's dignity in them. So I think people just think that, all right, I just got this box from this one, this is all I get. No, you can go and visit another one.
Give me a game plan. Like if I really wanted to get some deals at my grocery store on stuff that they were about to get rid of or that they will be putting on sale because they're bringing out something fresher, what are the times I should start going?
So first off, if you're going to the grocery store, you like days where it's really full. So I would just say that on a Sunday, on a Monday, the grocery store is going to be stocked. So those are the days that you're probably not going to see deals. So if everyone is shopping on a Monday, then you say, all right, let me go in there on Wednesday and just kind of see what they have left. The most important day, though, is right before the weekend. So I usually go on that Friday when the stock is really low and when they're trying to sell these things. That's when you start seeing a lot of the deals.
Another tip that you give about building a low-cost cart is making batch meals. And specifically, you talk about buying a small set of low-cost ingredients that you can make 3 or 4 different meals from for the week.
I just started a brand new series on this. It came from this idea. So what I gave myself a budget of like $16. I bought potatoes, I bought ground turkey, an onion, bell pepper, cheese, enchiladas, and canned black beans. And I was going to say, all right, I'm going to show you how to use this for the entire week. And so the first thing I made were these amazing stuffed burrito potatoes. So today I'm making these crispy cheesy waffles from that filling. And the next thing after that is like, hey, if you want to have a get together or a party, I'm going to show you how to make this amazing like dual layer dip. And then the fourth thing that I'm showing how to do is we're making mini grab and go frittatas. So it's things like that that show how you can take just these small staples and then turn them into several meals throughout the week. So that way you're essentially cooking just once and just doing small things throughout the week just to supplement.
That was Marielle Sagata, host of NPR's Life Kit podcast, with Kevin Curry, founder of Fit Min Cook. For more tips from Life Kit, you can go to npr.org/lifekit.
Data indicates the student math scores that fell during the pandemic are still down. Maine schools are trying to turn things around with a new initiative. Maddie Smith made public reports from one small school district in the country state.
If you guys can group up in groups of 3 or 4, you can turn your chairs around, and we're going to do the Candy Crush Data Challenge.
In Sean Donovan's career math class, Brewer High School juniors and seniors are doing one of Donovan's fun tidbits. They're using Skittles to get the mean, median, and mode of the color distribution across each path. Junior Cassie Levitt is into the lesson.
These Skittles are looking mighty fine right now.
I know.
I don't eat them.
Donovan says the data collection skills and the activity apply to election polling, medical sampling, supply chain optimization, and more. Donovan also expects his students to calculate their answers to problems using formulas in digital spreadsheets.
Digital skills are very important for most careers now, so that's kind of another piece that's been folded into the club.
Senior Andre Letts likes to use his computer.
That way, you actually can learn some of the different tools and items that you can use.
Letts wants to study criminal justice.
When we did our first project, we had to relate something from a year ago to some of the stuff that we were doing now. So I just did it based off crime rates and stuff like that.
It's part of a new effort from Maine education officials to show students that math has real-world relevance, and it comes in response to low math achievement.
matter to kids by connecting it to their daily lives.
That's what you're going to see change. Is you're going to see that shift in our classrooms where students are saying, teach me this. I want to know. Give me these skills.
Lambert says due to Maine's tradition of local control, it's up to districts to decide if and when they want to incorporate the new guidelines. Brewer High School's district didn't hesitate. Since the pandemic, the district has been struggling to fill gaps in students' math skills.
Keep doing the same thing and expecting different results is insanity.
Renita Ward-Downer, who oversees curriculum and professional development for Brewer's district, says something had to change.
I think our students have changed too, and so we've got to think about how we can meet their needs and think about how we can build that math is important, math is relevant.
So it'll be interesting to see how the distribution of the colors, if they're consistent.
Back in Sean Donovan's career math class, students are learning that Skittle color distribution is kind of random. Student Andrea Lutz had been hoping for more of a particular color.
My favorite Skittle flavor is probably gotta be green. I don't know if it actually has a flavor, I just know the color.
Once his group finished their calculations, Lutz had one more question.
Does that mean I can just eat them now?
Yeah.
For NPR News, I'm Maddie Smith in Brewer, Maine.
Things Considered from NPR News.
I'm Aisha Roscoe, host of Weekend Edition Sunday, where we're not just interested in what's going on in the world, but why it's happening and how. Details are important, so are different points of view. We're dedicated to bringing you the stories behind the big events, and the small ones too. Join us every Sunday morning for Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Weekend Edition, Saturdays and Sundays from 7 to 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
This is Eric Glass. On This American Life, some of your shows, turn on our tape recorders, see what happens.
If you can't get 7 calls in 12 days, you gotta look yourself in the mirror and say, oh, are you kidding me?
Like at this car dealership, trying to sell its monthly quota of cars, and it is not going well.
I just don't want one balloon to a car. Balloon the whole freaking place so it looks like a circus.
Real life stories every week.
Saturdays at 11 a.m. and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on News 88.7.
This is Jennifer Hickson of The Last shows feature eyewitness accounts of the most important or hilarious or moving stories in a person's life. We don't allow any sort of script on stage, so the stories have the excitement of a sporting event, but the intimacy of a tete-a-tete. The moth is simple and satisfying, like a home-cooked meal for the ears. That's the Moth Radio Hour from the Public Radio Exchange, PRX.org.
The Moth Radio Hour, Saturdays at noon on News 88.7.
Hey, it's Francis Smith, host of the Splendid Table. We think the Moth family best ways to understand the event is the way that they cook and how they eat. So every week, we introduce you to fascinating people from around the globe to share their stories and their expertise. From a culinary tour of Dubai to a Nigerian chef who has public homes in Philadelphia, and all things in between. Join our conversation at the Splendid Table from 8 p.m. American Public Radio.
Sundays at noon on News 88.7.
That's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detrow.
And I'm Marie Louise Kelly. Walking around upright on 2 feet is something no other primate does routinely. It seems to be one of the earliest major shifts in the evolutionary path that eventually led to us, modern humans. But exactly when that shift occurred is a mystery. NPR's Nell Greenfield-Boyce reports on some new clues from bones that are 7 million years old.
Walking on 2 feet, aka bipedalism, is something chimps can do a little bit. For that matter, so can bears and even dogs.
But those animals are not adapted to bipedalism, right? You can look at their bones, and there are no adaptations to bipedalism.
Scott Williams is a paleoanthropologist at New York University. He says way back in the human family tree, millions of years ago, there were ape-like creatures that could stride around on 2 legs. They had small brains similar to a chimpanzee's.
These are animals that I don't think any person today, if they were to
all scientists would agree on that.
Anything before that, it starts to get controversial.
Take a species called Sahelanthropus chidensis. It lived in Africa about 7 million years ago. Scientists have just a few of its bones, which were found at one spot in the desert in Chad. There's a crushed cranium, a couple of forearm bones, and a part of a big leg bone, a femur. People have been arguing for years over whether these bones have any features associated with upright walking. Williams used some new methods to investigate casts of the fossils held by Harvard's Peabody Museum.
So this is basically taking 3D models of the bones and adding landmarks on them in a large comparative data set with other fossils and humans and living apes.
In the journal Science Advances, he and some colleagues lay out evidence that they say shows human-like adaptations for walking upright, like an inward curve in the shaft of the femur bone, and a bony structure on the femur where a powerful ligament attaches.
This animal that otherwise looks very chimpanzee-like in its overall shape has these bipedal adaptations hafted on top, and therefore we're looking at a very early member of our lineage.
He says it's not clear how much it walked. It may have had a grasping big toe and other features associated with life in the trees. Carol Ward is a paleoanthropologist at the University of Missouri who wasn't part of the research team. She thinks this new analysis captures interesting features of the bones, but it's unlikely to end the debate over this species.
Because there's just not the anatomy preserved that we really need. The conclusive pieces just haven't been found yet.
She says telltale signs could come from, say, a knee joint or a pelvis.
We do not have any of those bones.
Still, she's optimistic scientists will eventually figure out how the transition to upright walking happened. She says more and more fossils are being discovered all the time. Nell Greenfield-Boyce, NPR News.
Pokemon trading cards are having a major moment right now, but you probably know that already if you were looking for them in stores during the holiday season. Here's Vincent Acavino as our story.
It's noon on a Wednesday in late November, and at a Target in Washington, D.C., a line of about 8 people has formed in the trading card section. It looks to be mostly men in their 30s, and they're waiting for Pokemon cards. Just then, a vendor pulls up, Pokemon products in hand. He has just 6 sealed items with him. Not enough for everyone in line, but he makes a point to distribute them fairly. 1 each, he says, and at the front of that line, cards freshly secured, is Yash Siagian.
I was here since 10 a.m., but this is nothing compared to some stores out in Virginia, in Northern Virginia.
Siagian is a Pokemon card collector and even runs a card show just outside Washington, D.C. There, people gather to buy and trade cards, rare cards, like the ones he brought with him to Target that day. It's kind of heavy. Opening up a hard shell case, he shows me the goods.
I just had somebody spend $600 today.
While you're in line?
Yeah, cash. I didn't want to make it look like I was doing drugs, so I was trying to be low-key about it, but
Pokemon cards are having a big moment. Content creators like Logan Paul post videos opening packs of cards to millions of followers. Even Pope Leo was photographed signing a fan's card. And here's NFL quarterback Joe Burrow, rattling off some of his favorite Pokemon at a press conference.
I mean, I liked Blaziken for a little bit, Zapdos, Mewtwo. Never liked any of the ghost characters very much.
In 2025, Pokemon was the most searched collectible on eBay, which means scalpers are everywhere, and cards are so popular that it can be hard to find sealed packs selling at their suggested retail price. So that's why people are flocking to the kind of card shows that Yash Siagian hosts.
Everywhere across America, we've been seeing local card shows pop up.
Standing outside the Beltway Card Show in Silver Spring, Maryland is where I found 13-year-old Austin James Dumont, a young collector, eager to show off his haul.
I did buy it today, although I think I haven't been into this for a long time. Pokemon Evolutions.
His dad, Chris Dumont, is just behind him.
So I used to collect baseball cards, and so I was seeing if he was going to be interested in baseball cards, not really going to take, but Pokemon started taking, and it was something that we could share, because it's a combined, the shows are often combined, even though now there are more Pokemon tables than there are sports card tables.
Inside the show, collectors and entrepreneurs of all ages exchange cards, cash. Every successful deal ends with a handshake. In a room with all Pokemon cards, I find 10-year-old Ethan Morales. He shows me a card he just got.
And then his ninjas, I just like about it how it's just flying in the nighttime because I like the nighttime because when I was 9, I used to catch fireflies. So he reminded me of that.
Mari Cruz, a vendor at the show, is set up just behind Ethan. She makes a point to be extra nice to the kids, she says.
I also try and sweeten the deal up a little bit when I can because it's a kid and you want them to have the most fun they can. Because at the end of the day, it's just shiny cardboard.
Cruz takes care to show the kids exactly how she presses her cards. Transparency that can be tough to come by when you buy online.
I think if you come out to a physical event like a card show, you can see that there's still very much a positive side to the hobby. You can just see when you give a kid a card, their face lights up. That's the most positive thing you can get. So
swayed by the holographic cardboard and nostalgia, it's a message that this 32-year-old millennial will do his best to keep in mind. Save some cards for the kids, especially those who didn't have any luck this holiday season. Vincent Acavino, NPR News.
Listening to All Things Considered.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from your part-time controller, specializing in nonprofit accounting and committed to supporting nonprofits with financial management services such as budgeting and forecasting. yptc.com/NPR. From Procter & Gamble, maker of ZzzQuil, with a range of products designed to relieve occasional sleeplessness to help people fall asleep. Learn more at ZzzQuil.com. From the Walton Family Foundation, working to create access to opportunity for people and communities by tackling tough social and environmental problems. More information is at waltonfamilyfoundation.org. And from the listeners who support this NPR station.
Did you know your gift to Houston Public Media could go twice or even 3 times as far through your employer's matching gift program? Many companies will match the charitable donations of their employees, and some even match gifts from retirees. That means your support for trusted news and programs could have double the impact for our community. Find out if your company participates at HoustonPublicMedia.org/match.
Support comes from Holocaust Museum Houston, a cultural institution offering immersive exhibits featuring authentic film footage, artifacts, and more, focused on history, education, and remembrance. Details at hmh.org.
This is your NPR station, News 88.7, KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at HoustonPublicMedia.org and listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
Cost of living, specifically prices are the thing that people have been telling pollsters is far and away their top economic concern.
Affordability is still top of mind and top of the political agenda in 2026.
We will preview the year to come in politics this Friday, January 2nd, on All Things Considered from NPR News.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Scott Detrow. This hour, as the Trump administration pushes to expand coal mining, advocates warn that loosening regulations could make miners sick.
Trump wants to make America great again. Well, we need to make our coal miners healthy again.
Also, an update on the protests in Iran.
Plus, Americans drink less.
That has prompted Kentucky bourbon giant Jim Beam to put production at its main distillery on ice.
It's not a total throw in the towel for the company. What it is more than anything is that they're feeling the effect of consumer demand being down, exports being down.
Ahead after news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Hurst. It's been 2 weeks since the Justice Department was supposed to release all the Epstein files in its possession. NPR Stephen Fowler reports there are well
Stephen Fowler, NPR News.
Swiss investigators say sparkling candles on top of champagne bottles may have ignited the deadly fire at a ski resort in the Alps on New Year's Eve. Officials say they'll look into whether the sealing material that was designed to muffle sound conformed with regulations. The candles, which give off a stream of upward shooting sparks, are commonly available for parties. At least 40 people died, more than 100 were injured in the blaze at the ski resort that was filled with partygoers. Representatives for federal employees filed a complaint against the Trump administration to restore insurance coverage of gender-affirming care. Coverage ended yesterday for people on certain government health plans. NPR's Sydney Lumpkin has more.
The Human Rights Campaign filed a discrimination complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. It follows an announcement that starting in January 2026, quote, chemical and surgical modification of an individual's sex traits through medical interventions would no longer be covered by federal employees' health insurance. That means neither the employee nor their covered family members on their health plans would be able to get coverage for gender-affirming care. The complaint calls this discrimination on the basis of sex. The Human Rights Campaign asked to restore the health insurance coverage. Sydney Lumpkin, NPR News.
China is defending big military drills it held around the island of Taiwan earlier this week. The demonstration of military might was criticized by the U.S. and the European Union. NPR's Emily Fang reports Beijing is calling the exercises, quote, necessary and beyond reproach.
A Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson says the exercises were to ward off, quote, any sinister plot to block Beijing's claims over Taiwan. The drills saw Chinese ships and aircraft encircling Taiwan earlier this week, as well as more than 24 rockets fired at the self-governed island. The European Union said the drills, quote, endanger international peace, and the U.S. State Department urged Beijing to, quote, exercise restraint in the Asia-Pacific region. But China says the drills were a show of force to punish what it calls separatists among Taiwan's government, namely the Democratic Island's president, Lai Ching-te. Emily Fang, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington. Tonight's the first full moon of 2026, and it comes at the moon's closest approach to Earth, which means it's known as a supermoon. As NPR's Nell Greenfield-Boyce reports, the moon might look a little bigger and brighter, but it's hard to tell with the naked eye.
If you were hoping to see the peak of the quadrantid meteor shower, the full moon is a bummer, as it will wash out the shooting stars. But if you like to moon gaze, you can also check out bright Jupiter, which will be right below the moon. This is the last supermoon until November, but 2026 will have 13 full moons, because the month of May will have a second full moon, aka a blue moon. There will also be a total lunar eclipse in March and a total solar eclipse in August. But that solar eclipse won't be visible from the United States. You'd have to go someplace like Greenland or Spain. Nell Greenfield-Boyce, NPR News.
In Telluride, Colorado, there appears to be no end in sight for a ski patrollers' strike that's been going on for about a week now after contract talks broke down. And that means ski resorts closed in the town. Ski patrollers want increased pay in an area where the cost of living is extremely high. The resort says the ski patrol members are asking for too much money. The Telluride Tourism Board says bookings for short-term rentals are down 54% since the strike started. Wall Street ended the day in mixed territory, the Dow up 319 points, the Nasdaq down 6. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Luminescence Foundation. Luminescence Foundation is dedicated to shedding light on neurological research focused on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases and supporting land conservation initiatives. This is NPR.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TVA, take a voyage through the history of funk music, from its early jazz roots to the explosion of 70s urban funk and beyond. Independent Lens presents We Want the Funk, tonight at 8 on TV.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Baylor College of Medicine. With 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
That's all things considered from NPR News. I'm
Meanwhile, President Trump is continuing to try to centralize power on both domestic and foreign policy. Let's bring in NPR senior political editor and correspondent Domenico Montanaro to talk this through. Hey there, Domenico.
Hey, great to be with you. Happy New Year.
New Year to you. I will start with the obvious starting point, which is it's not only a new year, it's an election year.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the midterm elections at the start. It is a good place to start because Republicans' control of the House is hanging on by just a really very thin thread here. 2025 electorally was really not good for the GOP. They saw big losses in special elections and in those November off-year elections. There have been a record number of congressional retirements. Trump's approval rating is at or near the lowest point of his second term. And all of those are signs of a potential blue wave.
Potential blue wave. If you were a betting man, Domenico, where would your money be?
Yeah, I don't take too many risks, but if the election were held next week, I'd say Democrats would be the odds-on favorites to take back control of the House. The Senate is still a much higher hill to climb. But the elections are not next week. Republicans are also somewhat insulated from losing too many seats because of gerrymandering. That's really created fewer competitive districts, more that lean to the right in recent years. The biggest thing, though, to watch is views of the economy. The cost of living, specifically prices, are the thing that people have been telling pollsters is far and away their top economic concern.
Right, we talked about that, about affordability all last year. It was the key to politics. Is it going to be the key for 2026 as well?
I think unquestionably for at least the third straight election cycle here, it's going to be the thing. And views of it and of Trump's handling of the economy are not good right now. The majority in our NPR PBS News poll last month said that the country is already in a recession, even though technically it's not. Gallup found that 2/3 think that the economy is getting worse and that Trump's economic approval rating in our poll was only at 36%.
36%, yeah.
Yeah, it's really low, and certainly not what he was experiencing in his first term, where it was a relative strength. So Trump and Republicans have to hope that views of that turn around. There isn't much, though, that a president can do from a messaging standpoint. I mean, Mary Louise, you can't just, tell people they should feel better.
So what are we watching for as we watch to see how President Trump takes this on in 2026?
Well, I mean, he's tried arguably more than any American president to try to centralize power, whether that's been leaning hard on media organizations, universities, law firms. He's gone around Congress with these strikes on boats that the administration says he's tied to Venezuela. We'll see if he continues that kind of saber rattling. Does he try to do more of that? It's tricky with his base not really wanting an interventionist approach. But look, he's ineligible to run in 2028. He's going to be 80 years old this summer. And if it becomes more obvious that Democrats take back the House, he's getting closer and closer here to being a lame duck. So I'd expect him to try and create things that might be legacy establishing, whatever that is. Peace in Ukraine and a permanent peace in the Middle East have eluded him. We've seen him put his name on the Kennedy Center, for example. So what else does he try to do?
Stay with 2028, and oh my God, I cannot believe we're already talking about 2028. But when might we find out who's going to run in a world beyond Trump?
And I'm kind of glad we are now. Remember, it was in October 2006 when Barack Obama went on NBC's Meet the Press to say that he changed his mind and he was considering running in 2008. Here we are 20 years later, and like that election, this is going to be totally open. So you never know. Stay ready for surprises, but this year is going to give us some clues about who's seriously thinking about it. Watch who winds up traveling to Iowa and New Hampshire, those early caucus and primary states. This is when people start laying the foundation, testing those waters for presidential runs.
And here's Domenico Montanaro. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Farmers across the country have felt the effect of President Trump's policies over the past year. Trump himself conceded many farmers would feel short-term pain as he shakes up American trade policies with tariffs and other measures. The White House says 2026 will be better for them. NPR's Kurt Siegler took a road trip across South Dakota farm country as part of NPR's American Voices series. Check in.
is this all even worth it? Mayor isn't eager to answer that.
No, I understand why they did it, how they did it. It's unfortunate that usually the American farmer, as you said, the Soviet farmer, is used on the tip of the spear.
Farmers as negotiating chips. Heartland states went big for Trump in 2024. He racked up bigger gains in rural counties than in his 2 previous runs. Trump's recent $12 billion aid package to farmers reeling from his trade war is billed as a bridge payment to buy more time for negotiations. His agriculture secretary, Brooke Rollins, insists farmers will get the certainty they've been asking for in the coming weeks so they can go to their banker and get loans. John Kipley says farmers needed the money yesterday.
You can't take that to the bank and tell them that you're going to get this bridge payment. They'll ask you how much. Nobody knows.
Kipley runs a tax firm in the town of Aberdeen. Many of his clients went to harvest in the red this year. Bankers are now telling some to sell out. The government lending firm Farmer Mac predicts more than half of farmers won't turn a profit next year.
If they don't have a dad or a grandpa or an uncle that's got everything paid for to work with you, you're most likely not going to be able to stay farming.
Kipley is 80. His farm just barely went through a crash in the 1980s, which caused huge rural flood. They were worried 2026 could bring another box, maybe worse, with ripple effects like more small-town hospitals and schools closing.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 110th Annual South Dakota Farmers Union Convention.
This anxiety was palpable at the Crossroads Hotel here. The next speaker at the podium was Governor Larry Roden, who took over when Kristi Noem became Homeland Security Secretary. He tried to reassure the crowd, saying Trump's cabinet, especially Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, gets farmers and what they're going through.
Work understands the implications of some of the unfortunate things that can come out of their bosses.
That got some chuckles and head nods. The farmers' unions historically have leaned Democrat, but even more conservative groups like the Farm Bureau have called the $12 billion aid package a good first step, but the praise for Trump more muted than usual. South Dakota Farmers Union President Doug Samke isn't sure what the end game is.
I mean, he's back at the fire, trying to put it out with the gardeners, and it's infernal.
Samke says the tariffs are just compounding problems that have been building since the farm economy crash in the 80s. Those who stayed in business were told to get big, export to survive. So it's hard to get back to just growing for America like Trump said he wants.
And I think this time it's even going to be worse for the simple fact that farmers today have so much leverage. I mean, the borrowing amount that they have, I mean, it's not just tens of thousands anymore. There's just hundreds of thousands and some are in the millions.
Early season blizzard is whipping a brutal wind across the prairie, which can feel bleak, especially this time of year when daylight is so precious. Country highways weave through farms, the occasional abandoned homestead stands eerily in the frozen stubble of cornfields. Finally, 150 miles later, the massive Missouri River, the unofficial line where the row crops of the lush Midwest start to give way to the rangeland of the arid West.
The old rule was almost 100 converting, 100 with 100 converting.
So I just crossed it?
You did, yeah.
This is cattle country near the town of Midland. Corey Byerly's family has ranched here along the rugged, shale-carved banks of the Bad River for more than a century.
It's a bad river because not Pasikas, what the natives called it. It floods so easily.
There are a lot of headwinds in the ag economy right now, but Byerly, who's 60, still has hope going into 2026. He recounts fondly a story he heard from another rancher who visited the White House for a ceremony. Staffers asked them to hang back because the president wanted to meet them after.
Trump brought cowboys back in, ranchers back in, said these guys are what make America great.
Byerly is also optimistic because high beef prices are one of the few bright spots in the farm economy. Ranchers are getting a reprieve after years of drought and the pandemic.
Yeah, we're not partying yet. You feel for them because at the same time we know exactly what it's like.
He's finally got enough money coming in to pay off some debts, but he'll keep budgeting conservatively.
Especially equipment cost. There's a reason that we're after 2012
He won't expand his cattle herd anytime soon. He says it feels like there's always another shock no one sees coming, that black swan event just around the next bend. Kirk Ziegler, NPR News, Midland, South Dakota.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Support comes from the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, presenting Art and Life in Imperial Rome, Trajan and His Times, exploring the impact Emperor Trajan had on art and culture during his reign. Now on view, tickets at mfah.org.
Typically what I've done recently is I put on an episode of Mill Street Radio and I just stir.
Hi, I'm Christopher Kimball. On my show, Mill Street Radio, we want to be your companion in the kitchen. Join us each week for fascinating food stories, answers to all of your culinary mysteries, and recipes that will change the way you cook.
Mill Street Radio, Sundays at 1 p.m. on News 88.7. Every week on the Pulse, we hear stories at the heart of health, science, and innovation. Sometimes physicians and professions we were down. Nurses tell us what they dream about. Beep, beep. Yes, you dream about it. We explore how science is done.
When we're looking for the needle in the haystack, we want to look in the right haystack.
And we have frank discussions about ideas.
It's a joke!
The Pulse, Sundays at 2 p.m. on News 88.7.
Support comes from the Houston Automotive Show at NRG Center, highlighting the latest vehicles, off-roading adventures, and automotive technology displays within the combined auto and boat event. Information on schedules, exhibitors, and venue details at automotiveshow.com.
Travel can open your mind and heart to new experiences, new people, and new ideas. Hey, I'm Rick Stevens. Join me for an hour each week as we explore fun, affordable, and culturally expanding ways to experience the world. We'll meet authors, guides, and fellow travelers who can inform and inspire us to find our own adventures near and far from home. Join us for Travel with Rick Steves.
Travel with Rick Steves, Saturdays at 6 a.m. on News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, supporting books, radio, podcasts, film, television, theater, and more to bridge science and the humanities. From Eric and Wendy Schmidt, the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. And from the Skoll Foundation, dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detra.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. Over the past year, President Trump has championed coal mines. He signed an executive order to, quote, reinvigorate America's beautiful, clean coal industry. The order aims to increase production, and it'll do that by cutting what it describes as unnecessary regulations. But is it also putting miners' health at risk? We've got Justin Hicks here from the Appalachia Mid-South newsroom. Hey, Justin.
Hey, Louise.
So President Trump signed this executive order early last year, early 2025. What changes have you seen in the coal industry since then?
Yeah, so President Trump vowed to reduce all that federal red tape, and he says he's going to end what he calls discrimination against coal-powered electric plants. And he started a so-called energy dominance conspiracy year that favors things like coal and uranium mining, and he added a type of coal used to make steel to a list of critical minerals. So that means the government closely watched and supported. Meanwhile, some power companies that were going to phase out coal-fired electric plants are actually being ordered to reverse course. And of course, this comes in the backdrop of everybody looking for more energy to supply a crop of data centers that are popping up everywhere.
Okay, now tell us about the questions this is raising about what this new approach might mean for miners' health and safety.
Yeah, so it really comes to a head with black lung disease. So black lung disease is a common name given to a lung condition really prominent in mining. Several of my public radio colleagues and I have been following this disease for decades. When it been on the rise in central Appalachia. And that's where coal is harder to reach because there are bigger layers of rock that just get crushed up in order to get to the coal.
Although I'm recalling the Biden administration did issue safety rules trying to limit exposure to that toxic dust you're talking about. What happened to those rules?
Yeah, so those Biden rules required annual health checkup for miners and cut the legal exposure levels in half of that toxic dust, and required network ventilation and other measures aimed to improve air quality in mines. And these rules affected every single mine, not just coal. And so it was almost immediately challenged in court. Companies that mine other stuff like sand, gravel, even the stuff that goes into kitty litter, they said the safety measures would just cost them too much money. And Biden's mine safety agency said it was going to defend those rules, but then Trump took office, and the new mining and safety administrator indefinitely paused the enforcement. So I spoke with Vonda Robinson with the National Black Lung Association, and she says she's really scared the Trump administration is signaling that they're going to roll back safety measures her group fought for decades to get.
Trump wants to make America great again. Well, we need to make our coal miners healthy again. We need to worry about the safety and health of our coal miners.
And Vonda's group held a rally in D.C. in October trying to get the government's attention, but Robinson said nobody in the Trump administration would meet with her. And so instead, this is just turning into a years-long legal drama.
In just a sentence or two, Justin, where does that court challenge stand?
Yeah, so it still has to be resolved. Mining companies are getting impatient. They are asking a judge of some idea. MSHA has said they're going to change rules to mining companies want to know what those changes will be. We'll find out here in 2026.
Justin Hicks with the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
The Trump administration heightened its focus on alleged fraud in Minnesota this week, announcing it was freezing federal grants and loans for small businesses and child care centers. Minnesota Public Radio's Dana Ferguson has more.
The Trump administration continues to target Minnesota over allegations of fraud. On Thursday, the head of the Small Business Administration says she was suspending COVID-era loans for almost 7,000 business owners in the state, and owners could be subject to prosecution and ordered to repay loans. Administrator Kelly Loeffler says the loans were suspended due to suspected fraudulent activity. And earlier this week, Department of Health and Human Services Deputy Secretary Jim O'Neill announced the department would cut child care assistance funding to the state.
We believe the state of Minnesota has allowed scammers and fake daycares to siphon billions of taxpayer dollars over the past decade.
The department cited a social media post from O'Neill when NPR reached out asking what evidence led them to suspect fraud. That post doesn't provide specifics. Still, federal officials have since expanded the scope to freeze child care assistance funding to all states until they can prove funds are being spent legitimately. 1.4 million children rely on the funds to attend daycare nationwide, according to the latest federal data. Currently, more than 23,000 of them are in Minnesota. The ramp-up in attention and efforts to freeze funds came in the aftermath of a single YouTube video posted last week that captured the attention of the White House and Republican lawmakers. A MAGA-connected social media influencer visited and questioned Minneapolis daycare centers operated by Somali Americans. He claimed without evidence that they'd committed fraud.
Answer the question, are there children? There's no children in that building.
Somali child care providers say they fielded threats and worse in the aftermath, and parents say they're fearful. Sadio Aden speaks through a translator at her kids' daycare center.
I'm a working parent, and I bring my kids here while I'm at work. And now I cannot bring my kids anymore because they are too scared.
Someone broke into the center earlier this week. Nasrullah Mohammed, one of the center's managers, says thieves stole records.
Unfortunately, we saw that there was important documentation, enrollment of the children, and also employee documentation that was gone.
Fraud has been a subject of ongoing reporting and federal investigations in Minnesota for years. Most notably, a COVID-19 era child nutrition program was defrauded out of more than $250 million. Dozens were convicted in connection to that scheme. More recently, federal prosecutors charged several more for allegedly defrauding state Medicaid programs. President Donald Trump seized on reports of those charges and others, singling out and disparaging Minnesota's Somali community.
ripped off that state for billions of dollars. Billions. Every year. Billions of dollars. And they contribute nothing.
Republican Minnesota House Speaker Lisa Damon, a candidate for governor, says her caucus shared information about daycares with the creator of the YouTube video. Damon says there should be consequences for providers and state officials who break the rules.
Fraud needs to end in the state, and if this is what it takes, since there's been inaction by our current governor, then this is where we're at.
State officials say Minnesota has been conducting investigations for years, and they're ongoing. And payments have been suspended for suspicious providers. Governor Tim Walz says the federal effort to spotlight fraud in Minnesota is political.
Nobody in the legislature on the Republican side is interested in solving this. My God, it would be the worst thing in the world for them if this is solved like we're doing it here early this year, because then what are they going to run on?
A U.S. House Oversight Committee will hold a hearing about alleged fraud in Minnesota next week. 3 Republican state lawmakers are scheduled to appear. Governor Tim Walz has been invited to testify next month. For NPR News, I'm Dana Ferguson in Minneapolis.
This is NPR News.
With so much going on, it can be hard to keep up with who's doing what and why. I'm Aisha Roscoe, host of Weekend Edition Sunday, letting you know whether it's news from across the country and the world, or a deep conversation about a novel, movie, or music, we got you. Grab your coffee or your earbuds and tune in to Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Weekend Edition, Saturdays and Sundays from 7 to 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
Hi, I'm Erica Barris from Planet Money.
And I'm Guy Raz from How I Built This.
Between inflation and worker shortages, it's important to understand the economy right now.
That's right. And find out how entrepreneurs make it work for them.
Listen to Planet Money and How I Built This from NPR for an hour of economics
and innovation
every week.
Planet Money and How I Built This, Saturdays at 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
Turn left.
Marketplace is supported by Schwab. Schwab offers investors choices like full-service wealth management, self-directed investing options, and trading on Thinkorswim. More at schwab.com.
What will be the big economic story of 2026? Our experts take a guess. And how the GOP's signature legislative win of 2025 will change how millions of people shop for groceries. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Solidigm. Today's AI ambitions require a different approach to storage. Solidigm offers solid-state storage solutions optimized for AI with higher capacities, greater speed, and energy efficiency. StorageForAI.com.
In Washington, D.C., I'm Kimberly Adams in for Kai Risdall. It's Friday. Good to have you along on this January 2nd. We know that 2025 was a whirlwind in the economy, from the tariffs to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act to the shutdown and more. Let's look back at the year behind and forward a bit to the year ahead with Catherine Rampell of MS Now and Anna Swanson of the New York Times. Hey, you two.
Hey, Kimberly. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that the big economic stories of 2025 were the tariffs and uncertainty. Feel free to add to the list. But what's your prediction for what we're going to be watching in 2026? Anna, let's start with you.
So I still think uncertainty is still a very valid word for 2026, especially in the area that I cover, which is trade. We're looking at the Supreme Court decision over the president's tariffs. But, another contender is probably boom or maybe bust, referring to AI. Maybe I'm breaking the rules with the single word you wanted there, but certainly, the AI boom has been a huge force last year, lifting economic data, lifting the stock market, making Americans feel richer, and just generally papering over a lot of uncertainty and other weakness in the economy. And there is growing concern about whether, that will be sustainable presidents, and that will really, come to the forefront in this case over tariffs this year.
Well, Catherine, that relates right back to what you were saying earlier about the midterms really mattering, because if the courts let the president go his way on tariffs, then it really matters what Congress looks like.
Absolutely. Right now, Congress has been relatively willing to let the executive branch subsume a lot more power, exercise a lot more power than has been historically the case. That's true for tariffs, but also true for a lot of other powers, including other aspects of power of the purse. We have an executive branch that has been impounding money, for example, basically not spending money that has been appropriated by Congress. So the Republican Party obviously controls both the White House and the legislative branch, both houses of the legislative branch. And as a result, there hasn't been a ton of pushback for some of this norm breaking, let's say. If Democrats end up retaking either chamber, more likely the House than the Senate, but both, maybe a long shot, you might see a lot more friction. You might see a lot more of an attempt from the legislative branch to retake some of those constitutionally granted powers.
Catherine, I want to stay with you on that topic we mentioned at the beginning, affordability. We've got Carla Javier coming up in a bit talking about some of the SNAP changes from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Lots of folks are seeing spiking health insurance premiums starting now. Medicaid cuts are coming. How do you expect to see these changes in the social safety net show up in the rest of the economy?
Well, certainly if you are among those who, for example, receives subsidized insurance on the marketplace, on the individual exchange, you are very likely to see your premiums go up. So on this big affordability question, your health care, your health insurance in the event is about to get a lot less affordable if in fact you were able to re-up your insurance at all. So that's one consequence. For people who are sort of more on the edge, who might be worried about job loss, or who have experienced job loss, or who are in low-wage jobs, their life is likely to get a bit less comfortable, if it was ever comfortable as well, because many of these safety net programs, as you point out, will be less available, will be more out of reach, whether because of administrative burden type changes. For example, forget the actual Medicaid cuts that are coming next year. States have been ordered to recheck people's eligibility more frequently, which means that there'll be more churn and more people who are eligible who are likely to incorrectly lose their insurance. So that's people who are on the rolls right now. If, in fact, we have a recession, which, knock on wood, we will not, but as Anna just mentioned, could very well be the case, particularly depending on what your crystal ball says about this AI boom/bubble. There will be a lot more people who would be potentially affected by those policy changes.
Lots to look forward to in the year ahead. Catherine Rampell of MS Now and Anna Swanson of the New York Times, thank you both.
Thank you. Thanks, Kimberly.
On Wall Street today, we made it through the first trading day of the year. We'll have the details when we do the numbers.
an involuntary withdrawal from the program, meaning the retailer would no longer be able to accept SNAP payments at all. Shelley Verploeg is a senior fellow at the National Center for Food and Agricultural Policy and a former USDA economist.
Retailers may decide it's not worth the cost of participating, so they may leave the program.
Verploeg says even more changes to SNAP are coming as part of the implementation of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
These restrictions are coming at a time when states will be asked to bear a greater burden in the costs of administering the SNAP program overall.
Verploeg says she'll be watching to see if the purchasing restrictions have a meaningful impact on SNAP participants' diets and health. After all, participants could always use their own money to purchase the restricted, non-nutritious foods and drinks. I'm Carla Javier for Marketplace.
Let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 319 points, 2/3%, to close at 48,382. The Nasdaq leaped 6 points, let's call it flat, to finish at 23,235. And the S&P 500 found 12 points, 0.2%, to end at 6858. For the week, the Dow lost 0.7%, the Nasdaq fell 1.6%, the S&P 500 dipped 1.1%. Those tariffs that were supposed to hit imported upholstered furniture, kitchen cabinets, and vanities right about now, the White House announced that they're postponed until this time next year. We'll see, but the announcement was good news for some retailers whose supply chains extended into China and Vietnam. Wayfair added 6.1%, Williams-Sonoma rang up 5.2%, and RH, you may remember it as Restoration Hardware, found just short of 8%. Bonds fell, the yield on the 10-year T-note rose to 4.19%, and you're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Viking, dedicated to bringing travelers closer to the destination. Viking offers a small ship experience with no children and no casinos. Discover more at Viking.com.
It's the NPR News Quiz, where we inform the news and chat with funny people like Hassan and Anuja.
Your parents were not up for you being a comic.
Yeah, they weren't really into it, but that's because they love me.
Right, exactly. They wanted what's good for you.
Make your parents proud by staying up to date on the news with Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. on News 88.7.
This is Aaron Wise. This American Life will have stories that surprise you. For instance, imagine finding a new hobby, realizing
To do this hobby right, according to the ways of the masters, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have to bend the law to get the materials that you need, if not break them. Yeah, to break international laws.
real life stories, really good ones, every week.
Saturdays at 11 a.m. and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on News 88.7.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kimberly Adams. The Trump administration's crackdown on immigration and increase in deportations was another big story of 2025 that's carrying into the new year. Last year, the U.S. and Ghana made an agreement that's essentially turned the country into a hub for West African deportees from the U.S. Ghanaians on both sides of the Atlantic are feeling the effect. Adam Mahoney is a reporter at Capital B, where he had the story. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What kind of deal does Ghana have with the U.S. when it comes to deportations?
Ghana has signed a third country deportation agreement with the Trump administration where they are basically taking in deportees from a series of West African nations. So non-native folks are being deported to Ghana and held in hotels and then military camps without really any understanding where they are, where they're going. These are folks who at one point have been granted asylum in the United States. So they're not legally meant to be deported back to their home country after being granted asylum. So this is a way for the Trump administration to work around that legality.
enforcement data, deportations of West Africans have really ramped up this year. How much and how is this deal contributing to that?
Compared to the Biden administration, deportations of African nationals in general has more than tripled this year. I spoke to lawyers and activists in Ghana, and they actually made the point that they think in reality it's not really about the numbers of deportees. In the grand scheme of things, it's been a little over 3,000 African nationals have been deported this year, which really pales in comparison to numbers we're seeing from Latin and South American countries. But this push is really about showing folks in Africa that the journey is not worth it to the United States, and for folks living in the U.S. who migrated there, people think that this push is really about telling them that they should self-deport.
Well, and as you point out in your story, even under the Biden administration, we were still seeing deportations of Black migrants at different rates than other groups, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's the racial discrepancies that have predated the Trump administration. So African nationals make up about 5% of undocumented migrants in the United States, but under the Biden administration, they made up 20% of deportations. So we've seen across the board kind of anti-Black mechanisms of criminality being enforced both administrations.
You spoke to folks both in the United States and Ghana caught up in this, feeling stuck, some of them hiding out in their homes here in the United States. Which story stuck with you the most?
When I was in Ghana, I met a woman named Gladys at a market, and we talked about the fact that in Ghana she's making a couple of dollars a day on a good day, and she's always dreamed about migrating to the United States with her 11-year-old child. But under this push by the Trump administration, she's been in communication with some of her friends back in the U.S., including a man named Raymond, who has a family and then moved to the United States in an attempt to kind of build some semblance of stability and safety. But in the U.S., he's been hiding out in his apartment, too afraid to leave his home. So all the way back in Ghana, she's also living through those same fears, right? It's stunting her desire and ability to maybe build a better life for herself. So it was really telling to see, just on both sides of the Atlantic, how this agreement is really shaping the lives of really everyone.
One of the big economic undercurrents that you highlight in your piece is that there's this big desire, like with Gladys, to leave the country. And you cited a survey that found like 2/3 of the respondents wanted to leave. Why do so many people want out?
Really, it's the economic conditions of the country, right? I mean, so in the capital city of Prague, you can be a college-educated person and still be making a couple of dollars a day, and most likely not be working in your own field. I spoke to a man who recently graduated from college with an engineering degree, and he now works at a restaurant and then commutes 2 hours to get to that restaurant for a couple of dollars a day, because jobs in his field are not being given to Ghanaians. Actually, there's been a plethora of foreign investment companies that have kind of flooded the country over the last couple of years, particularly Chinese companies and American companies, where those jobs are now flowing to international residents rather than Ghanaians.
What's waiting for folks, especially the Ghanaians, when they get back to Ghana?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I spoke to someone who was recently reported in August who had just purchased a home in Minnesota a year before his deportation, and he's back in Ghana with really no job prospects. He's living with a family member kind of lying low, and there's just not jobs
story, we're headed to northern Minnesota, where most of the country's iron ore is mined, and mined at a massive scale. From open pits that can be miles long and ore hauled by giant trucks that dwarf what you usually see on the road. Dan Crocker of Minnesota Public Radio reports on a new mine under construction there. Trucks are bigger than ever and can be operated without drivers.
People on Minnesota's Iron Range are proud of their mining heritage. Ask anyone, and they'll tell you it was iron ore mined here that was used to make the steel that helped win 2 world wars. Which helps explain why hundreds of people lined up in the cold last month in the tiny town of Nashua, outside the headquarters of a company called Mesabi Metallics. They were all eager to get an up-close look at the new mine's gigantic trucks.
It's an amazing piece of equipment.
Jake Schmidt is gawking at a bright yellow Komatsu brand truck the size of a 2-story house.
It's a real engineering feat to get that thing built and here and reassembled and going again.
Nearby, Larry Lanska says it makes older trucks, like the ones he used to drive, look like toys.
Well, I used to work in the mines, but this is a whole different scale.
Mesabi Metallics President Larry Sutherland lowers a staircase that's needed to climb into the cab. The truck can haul 400 tons of rock in a single load. That's nearly twice as much as the trucks used in other Minnesota mines.
The advantages it gives us here at Mesabi is hauling that bigger payload. It's more efficient per ton of material moved.
And efficiency is key because the mine will be competing against cheap iron ore produced in places like Australia and Brazil. The trucks also can run on electricity, an electric trolley line set up along the mine's roads. That reduces emissions and fuel costs. And eventually, they won't need drivers. These trucks are set up to run autonomously. They're equipped with sensors and communication networks to navigate the mine. Sutherland says they're more productive and safer.
Of course, as an operator in there, it's human nature sometimes. Mistakes happen, and with this engaged autonomously, very safely watches all its surroundings.
Autonomous trucks were first tested in remote iron ore mines in Western Australia in 2008. Now there are nearly 4,000 around the world, more than half of them in China. And that trend is expected to continue, especially in new mines like Mesabi Metallics, says Shebnam Duzgu. She's a mining engineering professor at the Colorado School of Mines.
You know, if you have a newly designed mine, you would definitely go for a autonomous one. It has way more advantages than the current systems.
She says it's harder to convert existing facilities, especially underground mines. Duzgun says there's often concern about job loss. She says that hasn't proven to be the case.
The practice in the world shows that it doesn't reduce, it changes the nature of the job.
Instead of drivers, she says mines will need control rooms and data analysts. The United Steelworkers, which represents Minnesota mine workers, is taking a wait-and-see approach on the technology. John Arbogast is a staff representative for the union.
It's something new to the Iron Range, and we don't have any experience dealing with it, and we're gonna take it as it goes, you know?
Sutherland won't say how much the trucks cost, but they're not cheap. They were part of a $110 million batch of equipment Mesabi Metallics recently purchased. He says the trucks will begin work in the mine early next year in advance of it fully opening by June, the first new iron mine in Minnesota in half a century. In Nashwauk, Minnesota, I'm Dan Crocker for Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Odoo, dedicated to providing software designed to scale with businesses. Odoo's programs for manufacturing, accounting, and more aim to provide building blocks for creating a custom software suite. Odoo, what businesses need.
This final note on the way out today. New year, new company on top in the global market for electric vehicles. Tesla lost its spot as the world's best-selling maker of EVs to China's BYD, which sold 2.26 million vehicles last year compared to Tesla's 1.64 million. Tesla sales are down 9% from the prior year, with analysts blaming the drop on expiring tax breaks for EVs in the U.S., along with the global backlash to Tesla CEO Elon Musk's political activities. Our theme music was composed by B.J. Liederman. Marketplace's executive producer is Nancy Fargali. Joanne Griffith is the chief content officer. Neil Scarborough is the vice president and general manager. And I'm Kimberly Adams. We'll be back on Monday. This is APM.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Holocaust Museum Houston, featuring 6 interactive exhibitions in both English and Spanish. Details at hmh.org.
I'm Jay Ellison. Join us for more true personal stories told live on stage. No scripts, no notes, no nothing. Each Moth Radio Hour is a mix of funny and heartbreaking tales that captivate and surprise and delight audiences around the world with their honesty and bravery and humor. That's the Moth Radio Hour from PRX.
The Moth Radio Hour, Saturdays at noon on News 88.7. Houston Public Media is a service of the University of Houston and is supported with your gifts to the Houston Public Media Foundation. More information available online at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
This is your NPR station, News 88.7. KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at houstonpublicmedia.org. And listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
In a lot of our reporting, I'm not going to say it transcended politics, but people want clean air, they want clean water, they want beauty around them, and that was the through line we found in every single state we reported on. I'm Rachel Abrams. That's coming up on the Daily from the New York Times.
The Daily is supported by JLL, helping businesses achieve goals through commercial real estate. From market insights to talent retention to finding the right place for businesses to grow, JLL is there. JLL, see it right away.
Go deeper into the day's most pressing stories with New York Times journalists, trusted sources, and the people affected. The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Hurst. Dozens of aid groups, as well as Arab and European countries, are urging Israel to reverse a ban on humanitarian organizations in Gaza. The Israelis suspended the registration of 37 aid groups, as NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports.
Israel says the groups failed to meet new registration requirements, which include providing to the Israeli government the names of all the Palestinians working for them. The aid groups will have to cease operations in the coming weeks in Gaza, the West Bank, and in East Jerusalem. Dozens of aid groups warn in a letter that the humanitarian needs are still extreme in Gaza, where winter storms have displaced tens of thousands of Palestinians. In the West Bank, the aid groups write, quote, ongoing military raids and settler violence continue to drive displacement. Similar concerns are raised in a letter from the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, and Egypt, among others. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
The Trump administration is pausing the processing of immigration applications from 39 countries. NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports the list includes those with partial or full travel restrictions to the U.S.
Last month, the Trump administration expanded the list of countries with complete or partial limits on travel to the United States from 19 countries to 39. Those restrictions became effective on January 1st. Then the Homeland Security Department announced in a memo this week that it would pause reviewing all pending applications for things like green card, citizenship, and asylum from immigrants of those countries. The agency also plans to review approved applications from immigrants of these countries, potentially going as far back as 2021. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, Washington.
2026 is likely to be a big year in American politics because it's an election year. Control of Congress could change as voters worry about the cost of living. NPR's Domenico Montanaro has more.
Republicans' control of the House is hanging on by just a really very thin thread here.
good for the GOP. They saw big losses in special elections and in those November off-year elections. There have been a record number of congressional retirements. Trump's approval rating is at or near the lowest point of his second term. And all of those are signs of a potential blue wave.
NPR's Domenico Montanaro reporting. A Virginia man suspected of planting 2 pipe bombs near the Republican and Democratic Party headquarters in Washington, D.C. the night before the deadly January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol has been ordered held in jail until his trial. A magistrate judge says Brian Cole Jr. is a danger to the community. His lawyer denies that, saying he suffers from mental health issues, is employed, and has no criminal background. This less than a week after federal prosecutors say he confessed to planting the bombs, which never exploded. This is NPR. President Trump and top Iranian officials are trading threats after Trump said on social media that if Iran kills peaceful protesters, the U.S. will come to their rescue, saying the U.S. is, quote, locked and ready to go. Ali Larijani, the secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, says the U.S. was stoking the demonstrations. The protests, now in their 6th day, have grown over recent days over Iran's failing economy, sparking anti-government chants, as 7 people have been killed in the violence. Tesla has lost its title as the world's top seller of electric vehicles. NPR's Maria Aspen reports shares in Elon Musk's car company fell nearly 2% today.
Tesla's sales have been dropping for the past 2 years, and now a Chinese competitor has pulled ahead. China's BYD says it sold more than 2.2 million electric vehicles last year, easily overtaking Tesla's 1.6 million cars. Tesla CEO Elon Musk thrust himself into U.S. politics in the last few years, but the consequences appear to have hurt his company. Musk oversaw many of President Trump's sweeping cuts to the federal government last year, leading to customer boycotts and protests before he fell out with the White House. Later in 2025, Trump's tax and spending law ended federal subsidies for electric vehicles, further hurting Tesla sales. Maria Aspen, NPR News.
Wall Street ended the day in mixed territory. The Dow up 319 points. The NASDAQ down 6. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, recognizing extraordinarily creative individuals whose ideas, solutions, and discoveries expand people's expectations of what's possible. MacFound.org.
From the New York Times, I'm Rachel Abrams, and this is The Daily. As the federal government reverses course on renewable energy projects and other policies related to climate change, states, cities, and local groups are stepping into the breach. Today, my colleagues Cara Buckley and Katrin Einhorn on their project to document small but significant efforts to solve climate and environmental problems in every state in the country. It's Friday, January 2nd. Cara, Katrin, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. The two of you just completed this really big and ambitious series, 50 States, 50 Fixes. And I have to say, it is more, let's say, optimistic than the types of stories we typically read in our august pages. So I want to talk about the origin of this. Tell me how this series started. Cara, I'm going to start with you.
So in 2021, I joined the climate desk, and my focus from the start was on people that were doing things in their communities that were working. You know, all these efforts that people were doing to try and reverse climate change, things that were having an impact, because a lot of things can have an impact.
Which is kind of unusual in the sense that we normally think of journalism as writing about problems, not about solutions.
Right. So this kind of beat is kind of looking at, you know, not the plane crashes, but the planes that are not only successfully landing, but doing it really well. An early story I did was about people taking over old golf courses and rewilding them, which was helping biodiversity.
I did stories about roundabouts in Carmel, Indiana, which are the most sustainable types of intersections and reduce emissions. And it was out of that reporting that I did over 3 years, I thought, there's going to be a solution in every state. I was hearing about some of them, and I thought, let's set ourselves a challenge and also go and find out a distinct climate or environmental success story in each one of the 50 states.
And Katrin, I remember when you first got to the climate and environment desk, when we talked a few years ago at this point, I remember you struggling to figure out how to write about this topic in a way that wouldn't always hit the same note of existential dread that you had kind of internalized in a similar way Cara had.
Yeah, I came to the climate desk to talk about biodiversity. So wildlife and ecosystems. I cover extinction, right? So when I first heard about Cara's series, it was in January of 2025, after the election, of course. And I was really excited about it because we knew that President Trump was going to be dismantling a lot of climate policy, environmental regulation. I was so interested to focus on the things that people will still be doing, are doing, have been doing to address things at the state, local, tribal levels, separately from the federal government.
So when you set out to do this series, what was the mandate?
We wanted win-win-wins, multiple wins. So it's not just resilience, it's not just adaptation, it's doing things that are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, that are making ecosystems healthier, that are helping restore imperiled species. So we want,
but at the same time helping human health and saving people money.
Right. In a way, basically, you're showing the interconnectedness of our climate to our economy, to our health with the series, it sounds like.
Precisely.
So at this point, you have reported from all 50 states. Congratulations. You have traversed the country.
And not just us, to be fair. It wasn't just the two of us. There was a whole team of people that worked really hard on this series, including colleagues on our desk and on national. 50 plus photographers.
50 plus photographers and 13 reporters.
Okay, that is cool. I want to talk about some of those stories. So let's start with each of you telling me about one that really stood out to you. Maybe because it had that multiple win or downstream effects that you mentioned. Cara, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the stories that really popped for me was about a funeral director in Northwest Missouri. He lived in one of the most rural counties in the state. His name was Eric Chamberlain. He runs a family funeral business. And he had been worrying for a long time about how his small town was getting smaller. People were moving away and they weren't coming back. And he was just trying to figure out, like, how could he help? Was there anything to reverse the economic misfortunes of the town? And he was at work one day driving a hearse. He was over the border in Iowa, and he saw these giant white blades of a wind turbine. He'd never seen them before. He wanted to pull over, but he was leading a funeral procession, so he did not. But he began investigating it, and he approached the Department of Natural Resources at the state, and he said, there's a lot of wind in my neck of the woods. Can we maybe look at putting in wind turbines here? He ended up setting in motion this wind energy project. He convinced local farmers to put wind turbines in their fields. At first there were just 4, and Eric told me he distinctly remembers flipping on the switch in 2008 and watching the town's electricity meter running backwards. Rockport announced it was the first community in the country to be producing more electricity from wind energy than what it needed. And this ended up accruing. More places in the county started putting up wind turbines. Today there's more than 340 throughout the county. It supplies 50 permanent jobs. And really crucially, the town has a tax revenue base from these wind turbines, $6 million a year. It's more than half of the
because we basically eradicated them from that area. You know, they were eradicated from much of the lower 48 states.
Because they're dangerous, or
because they were shot. There were a lot of predator campaigns in like the 1800s to early 1900s, and then laws were put into place, and these predators started rebounding.
to preserve them, basically, so they wouldn't go extinct.
So they wouldn't go extinct, exactly. And so these grizzlies have been slowly walking back out to the plains of Montana, where there's no real recollection of them in living memory. And one of the things that they've discovered is the wheat and barley farms. And this is like really good eating if you're a grizzly bear. It's a really nice, easy source of food for them. And so these farmers, they never had bears raiding their orchards. Now all of a sudden, there's bears stealing their apples and raiding their grain bins. And they're scared to go outside, certainly to let their children play outside. And in Montana, there's a man named Wesley Sarmento, who at the time was the bear manager for the State Wildlife Department. So he's getting all these calls from these farmers who are just desperate because these bears keep showing up on their property. And Wesley's trying everything to get them to go away, including trapping them, but that's dangerous. He tried having everyone clean up the grain very well, but it was impossible because they're on a working farm. He tried electrifying the grain bins, which did work, but it was really bad for the farm workers because it was just really awkward and made working a lot harder. And so then he heard about a local farmer whose son found a stray livestock guardian dog, like a Pyrenees type dog, you know, that are often put out like with sheep to protect them from coyotes or whatever. And to everyone's surprise, this dog was chasing bears away, including like mother bears with cubs, grizzlies. And so Wesley gets with this professor who studies livestock guardian dogs, and they decide to try this study where the dogs were not guarding livestock. They were basically guarding people. They were guarding the farms. They get these big breeds, these Turkish breeds like Kangals and Anatolian Shepherds, and they recruit farmers to participate in this little tiny study. And these dogs were just transformative for the farmers. And like the beautiful thing about this story is that these dogs were protecting the people and they were protecting the bears, because if the bears are gonna threaten people's lives and livelihoods, they're gonna get themselves killed. So the dogs were this tool for coexistence, and the families were really in love with the dogs. And more than one farmer said the same thing, which was, this dog would lay down his life for me.
What was your takeaway from this whole experience in Montana and the solutions that these people had come up with?
It was really striking how, with the loss of these big predators like grizzly bears over the last couple hundred years, you know, we forgot about these methods of coexistence. And now, as they're recovering, we're having to relearn these ancient practices that had been forgotten.
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by Seed. Seed's DS-01 is a 24-strain 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public.
Hear the stories shaping the world's conversation. You're listening to The Daily, produced by The New York Times. Learn more at nytimes.com/thedaily. Distribution of The Daily is made possible by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
From the Center for Investigative Reporting at PRX, this is Reveal.
If people are dying in your hospital of overdoses, you should know how many there are.
I'm Al Lindsay. We bring you the best investigative reporting. True stories with impact over the airwaves every single week. Reveal, because there's always more to the story.
Reveal, Saturdays at 2 p.m. on News 88.7. Julie Scroll. Let's break that habit, folks. I'm
solution to something. By the way, I didn't even know before I read your story that there's such a thing as a vegan tattoo parlor. So that's a tease. Anybody listening should just go read that story. But I wonder, did you find areas of the country that were just harder to find folks who are talking about any of these issues that we've been discussing?
Some of the states were definitely harder than others. And by the time we were working through the series, towards the end, we had covered so many iterations of how to tackle climate and environmental crises that we didn't want to do repeats. And so there were challenges for sure. But one of our best stories, one of my favorite stories, came from North Dakota, which it was in our second last batch of stories. And my colleague, Sachi Mulkey, found a beautiful story there. She found that the Standing Rock tribe was deep in an effort to get EV chargers set up throughout tribal lands.
And just remind us quickly, Standing Rock, we all know that name
because of the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, which were national, international news. They were trying to stop a pipeline from going through their land. And they had been trying for years as well, concurrent to that, to get off fossil fuels in their tribal lands by embracing all these clean energy projects. And more recently, they've been putting up EV chargers so you can drive. It's part of a intertribal network, so you can drive electric vehicles without ever having to gas up as you drive through tribal lands.
I would imagine that installing electric vehicle chargers is not an inexpensive project, especially if I'm not mistaken, the Standing Rock Reservation, that is an area where there's a lot of poverty, right? That was one of the issues with the Dakota Access Pipeline, is it was cutting through this already sort of vulnerable area. Where did they get the money for this project?
Right, well, one major source, it was the Department of Energy grant. They won a $6 million grant to help fund this effort, so that made this possible.
And as we spoke about at the beginning of this conversation, however, federal money, federal initiatives for environment and climate are going away or being dismantled. So I just sort of wonder, how does that affect programs like this in the future?
Yeah, a lot of them are having to put things on hold. You know, so in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where they've reduced methane emissions from the landfill through composting, they had two $20 million climate resilience projects they had to shelve. But on the flip side, cities are looking at things too that are under their purview where they can save a lot of money. And that was the case in Pittsburgh when it decided to tackle light pollution.
Light pollution, a type of pollution that I wonder how many people actually think of as real pollution.
People don't think of it as real pollution, but according to a 2023 study, it's growing globally at 10% a year. Many places are overlit. You know, we know that we're not supposed to have exposure to blue light at night, but we're staring at our computer screens. We know that, but we don't do it. We know that we don't do it, but we know it's having an impact on our melatonin levels. It's not just impacting us, it's impacting pollinator-friendly species and birds and bats. It's also interfering as global light grows. It's interfering with processes in the atmosphere that actually clean the air, that need nighttime darkness, according to a study, to literally filter out the pollution. Wow. Yeah. We're also using a ton of energy doing it. And so in Pittsburgh, an astronomy professor there, she wanted her students to see the dark skies at night. And she had been agitating, trying to raise awareness about the benefits of dimmer, softer lights.
So what did they come up with?
So they came up with dimmable streetlights that certain city officials can dim from their phones. Like you can just swipe across your phone if you're a city official and turn down the intensity of streetlights at night. They also designed streetlights that have hoods over them, so instead of the light glaring upwards, where it can disorient birds and other flying animals, they're hooded and just direct the light down. And they also save money. The city projects that And they were also, because they weren't slip sliding up and down the bank, the whole bank had come back to life with wildlife. All the eagles were nesting. We didn't talk about politics once. He was talking about doing things that helped his bottom line, helped his cows be healthier, and helped nature in the same token. It was almost like, in a lot of our reporting, I'm not going to say it transcended politics, but people want clean air. They want clean water. They want beauty around them. And that was like a through line we found that in every single state we reported on.
I do sort of wonder, like, maybe there was no question in the communities that you visited about what the problem was, but I can imagine that maybe there was debate about what the cause was, especially as it related to climate. And how much did that factor into your conversations, or even like how much did the cause of things affect the solutions that people were coming up with for themselves?
I do think it's worth pointing out that sometimes people didn't want to talk about climate change. Like they almost felt, sometimes I'd be interviewing people and they'd be scared to even use the term climate change. And you know, farmers and ranchers often are experiencing climate change, but they either don't want to use that word or they definitely don't want to talk about it as human caused.
Right.
Because it's been politicized.
Because they didn't want to blow back in their communities, or because they didn't believe it, or like
a combo. Yeah.
And there were people who didn't want to talk to us. We had one story lined up that we really loved. We really wanted to tell it. And then they talked amongst themselves and they said, we're really scared of, talking about it because we don't want the federal government to come after us because we're talking about climate and because we did get some funding from the federal government and we don't want to imperil it. So, it was nuanced, it was complicated from time to time.
I wonder if your outlook on the future has changed after spending so much time with people who have been thinking about fixes at this hyper-local level. Like how are you looking at sort of the broader, bigger, holistic problems that the country or the planet faces?
Yeah, for me, the answer is really two-pronged. The big picture is very scary, as the big picture often is. I mean, the crises we're facing, they're real, they're mounting, they're hitting some people disproportionately compared to others. But then on the local level, as we reported out these stories, as I was seeing all the different ways communities were tackling different aspects of climate change, I couldn't help but feel a little bit hopeful. Like there are so many people all over the country that are finding ways to work with the planet rather than against it.
Katrin, you?
It is really meaningful to spend time with people who are working so hard to make their communities better. And I really enjoyed that personally. But like in a broader way, it makes me think of something that Jane Goodall, the famous climatologist and environmentalist who died in October, something that she emphasized a lot, especially toward the end of her life, was that like every single day that we live, we are making a difference. Our actions are making a difference. And we get to decide what kind of difference we make. And the people that we interviewed this year for the series just embodied that. These people were really living in that spirit.
Carl Buckley, Katrin Einhorn, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Daily is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager. Bitwarden is built to secure online shopping accounts during the holiday season or anytime. Learn more at bitwarden.com.
Listeners of The Daily, get to the heart of the story shaping the world. For more on today's episode, go to nytimes.com/The Daily. Distribution of The Daily is made possible by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
The Daily is powered by the journalism of the New York Times. It's distributed by APM, American Public Media. You can go deeper into the stories you hear on The Daily at nytimes.com/The Daily. That's it for The Daily. I'm Rachel Abrams. See you on Monday.
Whether your weekend is full of work, play,
Washington, I'm Dan Ronan. Swiss investigators say they believe that sparkling candles atop of champagne bottles started that deadly fire in a Swiss Alps ski resort on New Year's Day that has killed at least 40 people and injured 119 others. Authorities say they're looking into the possibility those candles, which were giving off a stream of stars, sparks, ignited ceiling tiles that then started that fast-moving blaze. Valais, Switzerland, police chief Frederick Gisler spoke with reporters as her drove into her.
We now know there are 40 deaths. Their official identification is underway. It is our priority to identify these people as soon as possible.
Government leaders also announced they plan to hold 5 days of official mourning for victims, many of whom are young people. A federal judge has ordered the man accused of planting 2 pipe bombs in Washington, D.C. the night before the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot to remain in jail pending trial. NPR's Ryan Lucas has more on the criminal case against Brian Cole Jr.
The 30-year-old was arrested on December 4th after a nearly 5-year FBI investigation. Prosecutors argue that Brian Cole Jr. is a danger to the community and that he should remain in custody as his case moves to trial. The defense team says Cole has been diagnosed with autism, that he poses no threat to the community, and that he should be released. Now, in a ruling, Magistrate Judge Matthew Sharbaugh has sided with the government and ordered that Cole remain in jail pending trial, in part because of the serious nature of Cole's alleged offense, planting 2 pipe bombs near the Republican and Democratic National Party headquarters on January 5th, 2021. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
A federal judge today dismissed a proposed settlement between the Justice Department and the city of Louisville concerning police reforms that began after the killing of Breonna Taylor. It's NPR. A Danish energy company is fighting back against the Trump administration's efforts to block its offshore wind power generation project. Terry Schultz reports the Copenhagen-based company called Ørsted filed the complaint in the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C.
Denmark's Ørsted says it's challenging the suspension of its lease for a wind farm off the U.S. East Coast, one of 5 such multi-billion-dollar construction projects the Trump administration halted last month for what it says are national security reasons. President Trump has also called the turbines required to generate wind power ugly, costly, and inefficient. In a statement, Ørsted says its Revolution Wind joint venture, co-owned with global infrastructure partners Skyborn Renewables, has secured all required federal and state permits and has undergone a thorough review process. It will ask for an injunction on the suspension order. Ørsted says the construction is almost 90% complete, and the site had been expected to start generating power already this month. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz.
An earthquake measuring 6.5 ravaged central and southern Mexico today. The quake was centered near the town of San Marcos along the Pacific Ocean of Salt City. Along Acapulco, at least 2 people have died. There are reports of damage to roads as well as hospitals. The quake also interrupted a news conference being conducted by Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum. I'm Dan Ronan, NPR News in Washington.
This is Today Explained.
Shante Joseph writes about relationships, culture, lifestyle, friendships, and loneliness. And she wrote a piece in 2025 for Vogue that went viral, probably because it was titled, "Is Having a Boyfriend Embarrassing Now?"
The piece was essentially asking this question, if having a boyfriend has kind of lost the social standing it once provided to women, and I was analysing this through the lens of social media. I was looking at the way that women are very private about posting their romantic partners online. A lot of people were kind of sticking emojis over their boyfriends' heads. You know, we've all kind of seen this, and I think it started to ramp up, and then it became a little bit of a parody where people would just edit out their boyfriends' heads completely. But then I noticed that people would post like their wedding videos, or they would post their engagement videos and engagement photos, and in these very, I guess, private moments, they were online, but they were edited in a way that you never knew what the husband looked like. And I was like, okay, this is feeling a bit extreme. And fair enough if you are, you know, maybe a celebrity or a huge influencer, but people I knew with like 10 followers were doing that. And I was like, why are you doing this? And so I really wanted to, explore this strange trend.
And you're noticing something that has really become clear on the timeline. I remember like boyfriend reveals or things like that, but it's gone to outright hiding. So what did your piece find, and kind of what did you even mean by the question
information from social media. There are people who truly value privacy. I'm one of those people because I'm an autonomous person.
I mean, honestly, unless there's a ring involved, wait, no, scratch that. Unless you have literally walked down the aisle with someone, there's really no reason to be posting them on your social media.
And then they would go on to say, well, if I posted my boyfriend and he cheated on me next week and I had to go back and delete the pictures, people would be like, well, where's so-and-so? How's so-and-so? And I'd have to deal with the shame of that. But then there were women who just outright, the idea of having a boyfriend, they felt was embarrassing inherently because it didn't align with like the brand, is what I got to know.
I think in this day and age, men are detrimental to a woman's brand.
If you have a boyfriend and he sucks, he's terrible, he treats you poorly, you don't want to be telling people that, because like, what does that say about you, you know?
A lot of people felt like if I post my boyfriend on Instagram or on social media, I'm indicating something about me to the world that I don't want people to know. In the piece, one of the comments that I quote is this idea of someone saying,
I do recognize that having a boyfriend is kind of a Republican thing to do. I'm not Republican, but I recognize that it is.
And now our relationships, well, particularly straight relationships, say more about us than they ever did before. Like they almost have a political inclination in a way that I don't think straight people's identities have really been politicized in that way. Whereas before, if you posted your boyfriend online, it felt like a sense of achievement. But now it kind of feels like you are kind of like reverting to kind of old archaic ways. And I think it's the way that the sort of like heterosexual romantic relationship has almost been co-opted a little bit by the right. It feels traditionally very sort of conservative. I feel like I'm aligning to this idea of the world that doesn't really feel like natural to me. That's what's really got people. And I think this is also because of the rise in like the trad wife movement and this whole idea of like, you know, I'm just with my man and I'm making, you know, butter and egg from scratch and he's out working, and it just represents that very kind of traditional cultural way of living that kind of gives people the ick a bit. This idea that you now represent an ideology that isn't aligned to you because of your partner is definitely new.
Yeah, I was going to ask specifically about how we should think about this alongside rising trends like trad wife and others. You mentioned it. I mean, are these things that are happening at the same time, or are these just different communities?
I think they are happening at the same time because I think about the reaction to my piece, whether it's from, you know, the men who were just really angry that I could ever talk disparagingly about men, or the women who were very proud of their relationships, feeling as if this was an attack on them. I think the way we talk about relationships online has changed so much. I was talking about the recently, so who did I marry?
Number 37, who did I marry?
Or the Danish deception.
I knew this man has the power to destroy me, and that was exhilarating but also terrifying at the same time.
These women coming online, making these 60-part TikTok videos, detailing all of the horrible things that have happened.
Weston, Caleb.
I also have a story about Weston and Caleb. So around Halloween, we went to Hinge.
Right?
Yeah.
These things, so there is no sort of illusion around the fantasy anymore. And so I think that has gripped a lot of people.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the reaction. Why do you think it struck a nerve in such a way? And I want to specifically ask about, like, was there any pushback that you got that you felt was legitimate?
Yeah. I would say a lot of women initially responded to this piece thinking it was about me pitting women against other women. And this was the idea of like, you're not standing in solidarity with other women, you know, this is also part of the problem. And I had to really stress to them, this isn't necessarily about you guys. I'm not saying that you're doing something wrong or there's something wrong with you or your relationship is wrong, but I'm saying that there's a way that men have been allowed to behave and act in society for so long that has only gotten worse. And I did understand how it could initially read like that, feeling as if, you know, people were being shamed, this idea that I, you know, hate love or I'm shaming people for finding love. I think that it's the opposite. I love love. I think it's wonderful. And, you know, but then obviously there was a lot of kind of hateful abuse, a lot of racist abuse, men talking about like the way that they'd want to see me abused and die. And, you know, it was really awful. And I think I definitely struck a nerve, particularly with men, because I thoroughly believe that this emotional space, this sort of dating space, feels like the last place that they can really have true domination. When women are more educated than men, you know, we are working jobs, we're running our households, like the family, the work, these are spaces that men predominantly had like huge amounts of power over, and I think they are losing a lot of that. And so I think it was this sort of like feeling like they're losing, that made them really scramble. And also I think because I was black as well, I got a lot of like racist abuse on top of this. It kind of felt like I was ruining the sort of like sanctity of these like straight white relationships, like I was an adversary to them. And so it was quite loaded when I went through a lot of the abuse, and I could kind of see where these people were getting riled up from.
You write in the piece that you did a call out on your Instagram, and the responses from followers said that there was, quote, an overwhelming sense of from single and partnered women that regardless of the relationship, being with a man was almost a guilty thing to do. So are we talking here just about like shaming heterosexuality partnerships? Like, it seems like straightness is at the core of this.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think this is what really like upset people as well, because we don't talk about heterosexuality in this way. We see it as a norm. This is just the way to be in society. And so we should never really question what's going on here. But actually I was like, no, it's deeper than that. So one of the inspirations behind this piece was a book by Professor Jane Ward. Her book is called The Tragedy of Heterosexuality. And in the book, she has a chapter that is dedicated to the things that queer people say behind their straight friends' backs. And it was absolutely fascinating to get into the perception of straightness, straight people, and straight culture. And I think the idea of embarrassment definitely came from reading that and really realizing the ways that, yeah, straight culture is very embarrassing.
What do you think we've learned about straight relationships from this episode?
Yeah, I think what I've learned is that there's this sort of, from both sides, I think people are still trying to clamor onto the privilege that being in a relationship, particularly a straight relationship, gives them. And I think for some people, their anger to this piece was about them realizing that I might lose this privilege and they might not have many other privileges. And so losing this was like a big deal. And then also I think the biggest reaction from this piece came from like single women who were like, oh my God, for the first time, I don't feel a sense of shame for my identity. And this was women in their 40s, but also teenagers messaging me being like, I've never had a boyfriend and I felt really ashamed about that and I felt bad about myself and I thought there was something wrong with me or that I was ugly. And I was like, God, you are so young and you've already internalized all of these messages because you've been told your whole life to be in a relationship is the most important thing, and everything outside of that doesn't render me as an individual or like the same person. Like, I'm glad they felt better, but also I felt so upset that that conditioning runs so deep.
Do you feel like you have come through this thinking like boyfriends are more or less embarrassing?
Do you know what? I think I've come away thinking that they're more embarrassing. I can't lie. Because the men are being embarrassing and the women with boyfriends upset about this piece are even more embarrassing. So I'm like, damn, I might have to double down.
That's Shantae Joseph. Coming up, are straight people even okay? We're going to ask Professor Jane Ward.
Get ready to turn right.
You're listening to Today Explained.
My name is Jane Ward. I'm a professor of feminist studies at UC Santa Barbara, but I mostly work and teach in queer studies.
And Jane, you wrote a book that our last guest, Shantae Joseph, said was a bit of an inspiration for her viral article. The book was called The Tragedy of Heterosexuality. I guess I'll start with the obvious question then. What's so tragic about it?
So, the book has clearly a provocative and playful title. But what got me thinking about this book is that queer people, at least in my orbit, had been having these conversations for decades about, are straight people okay?
Straight people are so weird. They're like, cooking is a woman's job. Unless you're grilling, then it's a man's job.
I just found out that straight dudes are calling the thing that you grind up weed with a grinder, a crusher, because grinder has gay connotations.
What? What? Are straight people okay? Get a grip.
That even became a meme, but long before, it was just a conversation we were having in our kitchens.